Hello and welcome to Casually Current, a casual cinemedia podcast. My name is Chris.
My name's Mike.
And my name's Justin. Casually Current is where we watch and discuss current film and television.
This week we'll be going over what's on our minds, and then we will be going into a feature review for Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs.
That's funny, I love dogs too.
I also love dogs.
Lovely.
If you want to let us know what you think about Isle of Dogs or anything we've watched previously, if you want to stay up to date with what we're watching next and ask us questions we can answer on the show, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinemedia. You can join our Facebook group and talk film with us at facebook.com/groups/casualcinemedia, or you can email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
All right, gentlemen. So, what's on your minds this week? Chris?
Yeah, so this week I got to watch The Witch, catching up on some older movies.
Oh, nice. With Anya Taylor-Joy?
Yeah, from Thoroughbreds. And that was actually one of the reasons I watched it, because I enjoyed her in Thoroughbreds so much. And you had said that she was in The Witch. I wanted to tune in and see what that movie was like on your recommendations.
What'd you think?
I really liked it. I'm not a big horror movie guy, and I think, and we watched A Quiet Place earlier, and I'm not quite sure where these movies fit in, because I didn't necessarily think of either one of them as horror movies. Horror movies
they
usually
feel better, in a sense.
Yeah, and they also, there's suspense involved and mystery, but horror movies for me are more about gore. There's more gore in horror movies. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, not necessarily.
Certain types of horror movies.
Yeah, certain horror movies.
Yeah. Well, and for me, that's kind of, I guess that would be the type of horror movie I'm not necessarily into as much. But, yeah, I really enjoyed The Witch. I thought it was shot really well. The acting was really good. Anya Taylor-Joy, was that her name?
Yes. I think it's Anya.
Anya. She was really good in it. The boy was also, her brother was really good in it. Just all around, just a really solid movie. Actually, A24, which is the company that made The Witch, A24 makes a ton of great movies. That's our hope for the future, right? A24 makes original content, and really solid original content. They did Lady Bird. They did Room.
That company that helps P.T. Anderson, Annapurna Pictures, they're really good too.
Yeah, I think doesn't A24 buy a lot of movies as well?
They may go to film festivals and buy them that way.
Most things I've heard of that come out of A24 have been purchased by A24 as opposed to made originally by A24. But I'm sure they have some things that they hop on board with from the get-go.
Yeah, anyway, so A24 is really great, but The Witch is really good. Lots of cool twists and turns.
And the old school dialect in which they speak is so awesome in that movie. It's so immersive in the old school way of talking.
Right, and two of the creepiest kids in cinema history. They may actually rival The Shining.
I was actually, when that movie came out, I remember there was an interview with the director where he was talking about how he had to choose kids that were not necessarily even the best actors, but kids who just understood what they were saying, who understood the old style of talking.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because if they don't understand what they're saying, they're not going to be a good actor. And I was like, that's fascinating. I didn't even think about that when I was watching it, but when you look back on that movie and how they talk, it makes complete sense of why he would probably have to narrow it down to kids who were just naturally understood what they were saying. Yeah,
that's tough for adults doing Shakespeare, let alone kids speaking in another language, another dialect or
right, like a different time,
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really cool, but neat movie, and best animal character in a movie in a long time, and Black Phillip.
Yeah, those rhymes are pretty awesome.
Yeah, Black Phillip rips.
Are you saying he farts?
No, rips in the cool 90s sense.
Like skateboards.
Yeah, my girlfriend actually has a Black Phillip shirt.
Does she? That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. I do think The Witch is hardly a horror movie.
No, but
I think we kind of made that point, but yeah, it's good for what it is, I guess. But I would say it's, if you wanted a horror movie, my girlfriend and I watch it because she wanted to watch something scary or whatever.
I bet she hated it.
Yeah, and she was not pleased.
Yeah, it's not scary, but it's suspenseful. It's really suspenseful, I thought. I
just thought it was more interesting than anything else. I honestly didn't get much suspense or anything horror-y out of it. I just feel almost like it's a straight drama marketed and disguised as a horror movie.
I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think it's suspenseful in the classic sense, but I think there were some moments where I was like, where the hell is this going to go?
Yeah, there are situations that I found suspenseful.
Yeah, where I was like, what the hell am I watching? Like, this is nuts.
Mysterious, I suppose.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's interesting.
I don't know.
And the other thing, I've already talked about this before, but Atlanta had one of its best episodes this week. Lakeith Stanfield, there was a bottle episode with him in it, with a Michael Jackson type character. Just really good cinematography, really good direction, acting. I think Lakeith Stanfield's going to be a star.
Oh yeah, definitely. That guy's awesome. On the Casual Cinemedia Twitter account, I went ahead and followed Lakeith Stanfield's new Twitter. So we're going to be up to date on everything he's doing.
Yeah, I'm excited. Have you guys seen the trailer for Sorry to Bother You? Have you guys, anybody? It's got Lakeith Stanfield and Tessa Thompson, who is in Annihilation.
She's in everything now.
Yeah, she's going to be a star too, but she was in Annihilation and Thor Ragnarok. Sorry to Bother You looks like it's going to be an awesome movie. You guys should check the trailer out, but for sure, watch Atlanta.
All right, so this week I actually rewatched a movie that I have not seen since right when it came out on DVD, before I even had Blu-rays, and that is my favorite George Clooney performance, and that is Michael Clayton. Have you guys seen this movie?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, we saw it in theaters together, actually, when it came out.
Yeah, that's actually true. I remember now we saw that the same day we saw... What was it?
Darjeeling Limited.
Darjeeling Limited, which is actually interesting because this is a Wes Anderson episode. But
it all comes back around.
Yeah, it all comes back around. But that movie, I loved it when I saw it in theaters. I loved it when I saw it on DVD. But it's even better now. Like, I love it so much. I think that movie is so good, and Tom Wilkinson starts out with this monologue before you even see him. You don't even know who's saying it, but if you know Tom Wilkinson's voice, you recognize it immediately. And it's so intense, and he's having this nervous breakdown. People who haven't seen Michael Clayton, it's about George Clooney, who's like a fixer for like a law firm. And he's not even like an officially on a lawyer, really. But they have him basically just fix messes. He's a janitor for all these really rich people that get in over their heads with crimes that they can't handle or they're not smart enough to navigate their way out of. So the law firm calls in Michael Clayton to come and solve everything. But their top lawyer for their biggest client, which is like a big weed killer company, but the weed killer is basically covering up all this terrible stuff, and the lawyer has a nervous breakdown in a what do you call it, like a crisis of conscience.
Yeah.
And he starts trying to spill the beans, basically about everything that they've been covering up about this weed killer and the harm it does to people. And I think it has one of the most realistic and chilling portrayals of what happens whenever Joe Citizen goes up against a big corporation.
Yeah, you're right. Tom Wilkinson is really, really good in this movie.
and Tilda Swinton is so good in this movie. And
that was the movie where I actually,
after
I had seen it, took notice of Tom Wilkinson and knew who he was.
Yeah, I took notice of both Tilda Swinton and Tom Wilkinson. I already knew who Tilda Swinton was, but I think before that I'd seen her in things like Constantine. This was a big changing point in taking notice of Tilda Swinton for me as well. I think she is so good in this movie as the high-up management, not quite CEO, but high-up management of this weed killer corporation, and her trying to figure out how to keep her job and the morals that she's willing to sacrifice in order to keep her position. It's just fascinating. And George Clooney gives the best performance that he's ever given, in my opinion. And I think he should have won an Oscar that year. But he was up against Daniel Day-Lewis, so
I was gonna say,
that was never going to happen.
Unfortunately, this movie came out in the same year as No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood, and had to contend against those in the Oscars. I think if it had come out a year later, like looking at the Oscar nominees for like the next year, maybe even the year before, it would have, I think, won a lot more, been a lot more noticed. But it kind of fell by the wayside next to, to be fair, two really great movies in No Country and There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, 2007 was an exceptionally good year, but Michael Clayton, if it was released any other year, it probably would have been my favorite movie of the year. It's so good, and I think the last shot of the movie is perfect.
Yeah, Tony Gilroy wrote and directed that one. Funny enough,
that was his first directorial movie, right?
That's right. He wrote like the Bourne movies. Also, supposedly, he finished directing Star Wars Rogue One, and now he has a screenplay because he rewrote so much of it. And he actually has a movie coming out, I think it's this week, Beirut, with John Hamm in it.
Yeah, he's actually done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Not all of it's good.
No.
But Michael Clayton is fantastic. So if you ever want a smart adult drama, give it a shot. It is so good. I can't stress that enough. I think Michael Clayton is great. And it's even more profound and unsettling today than it was when I saw it in 2007.
Cool. I'll have to watch it again. I don't think I've actually seen it since 2007, like since it came out on DVD, and I think I watched it. I think I bought it actually on Blu-ray at some point, but I still haven't watched it.
Well, when you do, you're in for a treat. The other thing I wanted to talk about before I hand it over to you, Justin, would be the TV show Hannibal. I've been watching this with my girlfriend who's really into this show, and I remember Chris was telling me that this was his favorite portrayal of a serial killer in any TV show or movie. Do you recall that, Chris?
I do.
Do you stand by it now?
Yeah, no, I really like it. I think, what is his name? Mads Mikkelsen. I'm all on board for Mads Mikkelsen. He's really a great actor, and I think there's a little bit more subtlety to his performance as Hannibal than Anthony Hopkins. They're different performances and different things, but I just like his performance as Hannibal in the TV show. How do you feel about it, Mike?
I think the TV show is very good in a lot of ways, but there are certain things that it does, stylistic flourishes, that I'm not super into. There's a lot of use of slow motion. There's a lot of the main character spouting off really serial killer TV showy type dialogue. Like, I guess the main character. Okay, so it's basically the TV show of Hannibal is based about Hannibal Lecter. It's a TV show adaptation of Red Dragon, or at least the characters from Red Dragon, kind of repurposed to make a TV show. Mm-hmm. And in it, the Will Graham character is used by the FBI to put himself in the mind of serial killers because he can think like a serial killer. And so that's the basic premise, but he's also, because he can think like a serial killer, he has stability issues mentally. So he has his own shrink enter Hannibal Lecter. That's an interesting premise. I think where the show loses me a little bit is some of the extravagant dialogue where you'll have the Will Graham character putting himself in like the mind of a serial killer, and he'll like retrace the steps and close his eyes and kind of envision it, you know? Mm-hmm. But then he kind of talks the way what he's thinking as he's thinking it, so the other agents can catch on and be like, oh, that's what they're thinking. But it sounds so lame sometimes. Like, he'll be looking at bodies that are posed in certain specific ways, and he'll be like, okay, so these bodies are posed like angels, so I'm going to put myself in the mind of the serial killer. And then he'll say stuff like, I walk in the room and I allow them to become angels. I give them permission to do so. You know, like, he can read the serial killer's minds in such an extravagant way that I just roll my eyes at it. Like, it doesn't seem realistic or believable. It just seems like very TV showy.
Is it because like you don't understand the leap that he's making? Like, there's not enough like bridges for you to connect
maybe
why he thinks that and what he thinks
maybe
that?
It's like the killer, like the writers of the show thought of interesting serial killer deaths, and so they're like, well, now our protagonist is going to catch on to these intricate deaths that we thought of because we want the audience to know how intricate of deaths we thought of. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. we wanted our serial killer to make them into angels, so we want our main character to catch on to that and everything. I don't know. It just seems lame. It's not bad by any means because that's the premise of the show. So
yeah, I think the extravagance part, the slow motion, and especially as you get later on in the seasons, that gets to be more of a thing. Brian Fuller, that's why I couldn't get through American Gods, because in American Gods, I think he just goes all out with that stuff.
Oh yeah, American Gods season 1 is wacky.
Yeah. So I agree with you somewhat, but yeah, I think it's enjoyable to watch.
No, it is. And I say all that with the caveat of saying it's a very, very good show, and I would rather watch it than any number of serial killer shows.
Yeah, what did you think about Mads Mikkelsen?
Mads Mikkelsen is always great.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. He's very good. I don't like his portrayal of Hannibal as much as you do.
Okay.
I not because of him or anything he's doing.
Right.
But just because of what I mentioned earlier, which is just like there's too many episodes, there's too many twists. It seems like a lot of times characters make decisions that make no sense other than to provide a twist in 2 or 3 episodes.
Okay.
But that being said, it sounds like I'm being harsher on it than I feel. I think it gets better. I'm in season 2 now, and like many shows, halfway through season 1 and into season 2, it finds its legs a bit.
Yeah. I especially like the cooking scenes with Mads Mikkelsen as he cooks this food porn, but you know that it's human flesh.
Yeah, it's always
really
so
good.
silly because
Yeah.
it does that thing where he's like in like a 4-star restaurant or something like that.
Right,
where
he's like this
he's
fancy
always
chef.
he's always like, I have like veal cooked by like smoked hay, so it has a smoky hay taste to it with a certain specific kind of wine, and it's just like so ridiculous sometimes.
Well, I think that's a fun part of it, though. It's so ridiculous, it's fun.
All in all, I would say it's a good show. I am interested to see if they end up bringing it back for the 4th season, because I know that it got canceled after 3 seasons due to lower viewership, but there have been rumors that it will be revived.
So do you know what the plan is for the 4th season if they do it?
I don't. I'm only in season 2 right now, but I would imagine they're going to use up the Red Dragon storyline and they're going to need to move on to other Hannibal adventures.
Yeah, I read an article with Brian Fuller talking about it, and he had wanted to go ahead and move into the Silence of the Lambs, so he would bring in Clarice Starling.
Good, because I think the Will Graham character needs to go.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens. I don't think that we're going to see another season of it. I think that's just kind of talk.
Yeah,
but
probably so. But yeah, Lawrence Fishburne's in it. It's all right. It's pretty good. I can understand why you would think it is probably one of the best portrayals of a serial killer, because it goes into the psyche a little bit more than a lot of shows do, and Mads Mikkelsen's awesome. So, I don't know. I'm going to finish it, but I don't think I like it as much as like Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs. I think I prefer the crazy movie Hannibal versus the TV show Hannibal.
yeah, completely understandable.
I have no opinion because I haven't seen any of the show. So I'm directly in the middle of you two, ignorantly so.
Hey guys, it's Mike. I just wanted to interrupt for a second to let you guys know that we are about to talk about the Reddit AMA with Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy in regards to Westworld Season 2. In that AMA, they basically pulled a big joke on everyone, and the spoilers that we're about to talk about turned out to be a very extravagant Rickroll. Lots of news publications fell for it, lots of people on Twitter, ourselves included. So we didn't want to cut the segment because we think the conversation's pretty interesting. So anyway, we just want to let you guys know we are aware that this is a Rickroll and that there are no real spoilers for Westworld Season 2. But hey, enjoy the segment anyway.
This week I actually had a pretty busy week and I didn't get to watch a whole lot of things. So I don't have any movies other than the ones that we're actually reviewing in full on the show to talk about. But I did want to talk about an Ask Me Anything that was done on Reddit by the co-creators / executive producers / directors of Westworld, Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. What happened at the end of this Ask Me Anything, they basically said that what they wanted to do was potentially release a video that lays out the entire plot of Westworld Season 2 with the twists, the turns, the everything about it. That way, the group of people who are in the Westworld subreddit who sit there and try to figure out and guess what's going on and are basically, I think you said before in a previous episode, Mike, that Reddit had figured out all of Westworld Season 1 before the second episode had aired.
Yeah.
Right?
I was super disappointed because they were like, here's how it's all going to play out. And I was like, hopefully they're wrong, but they weren't.
Well, I think you weren't alone in that. So there was a lot of people that were spoiled in that way by the Westworld subreddit, and these people trying to figure out what's going on and basically figuring it out. So they want to release this video laying out all of Season 2 so that the people who want to watch it can just watch it and not have to figure it out. And that way people aren't spending that time figuring it out and posting on the Reddit and spoiling it for people who don't want to figure it out.
Well, because even if it's a theory, like what they did last time, they came up with the answer, but it was still just a theory. But that theory was a spoiler, so they want to just kind of alleviate that. Similar to Game of Thrones, how they protected the people that had read the books protected the answers.
They're basically leaving it up to the Reddit community. If they upvote this post where they're explaining this idea enough, they're going to do it. But I wanted to find out, what do you guys think about that? And Mike, you started already, so you go ahead.
I just don't understand the benefit of this. So let me make sure I understand this straight. So they're offering, before even episode 2 airs, they're offering to give broad strokes the entire second season so that way people who like to speculate don't get to speculate. Instead, they just get to read the answers and then just know it all?
Yeah, it would be before the season even airs.
Right. So what's the benefit?
As I understand it, so when Game of Thrones first came out, people had read the books before, right? So there wasn't as much theory crafting, and people protected things like the Red Wedding and things like that from people that didn't know the answers.
Some people protected it, but then some people spoiled it. So why?
And you're right.
Explain to me how putting the answers out there to a show that has no book where people can spoil will stop people from knowing spoilers.
And I don't know that I agree with it, but I'm just going to argue this other point. I think the reason for it is because last year, when it happened, people theory crafted it. And so if I'm on Reddit and it's just a theory website, and before the second episode comes out, people had figured it out, I've stumbled upon these spoilers without knowing they're spoilers, which is kind of interesting because you don't know that they're spoilers. So how can you...
You don't know, so it's fine.
But it can take away the surprise. Like, if you've read that as a theory and it's slowly starting to make sense, by the time you get towards the episodes where like certain things are revealed, you've already kind of seen it coming, I think, and it's definitely not a surprise because you've already read exactly what happens. You're like, oh, okay, these people figured it out, right? I think that's the idea, is to prevent that from happening. I am with you, Mike, that I think that there's too many people in the world that get enjoyment out of posting spoilers and spoiling things for people, that if these things are out there, I think you're going to open up a whole new can of worms of ways that people are being spoiled, right? You're going to eliminate one fire and start another.
Well, the thing is, the fire that they're eliminating is not even that big of a deal. Like,
so
the idea that someone can log into Reddit and be like, oh, I might have spoiled myself because someone got a really accurate theory, I guess time will tell, versus those creators spoiled me because they weren't confident enough that their show had enough complicated twists and turns to not be spoiled. So instead, they're just going ahead and spoil everyone. It's like, that's part of the fun of TV shows. You might as well just be Netflix and drop it all at once.
Let me ask you, Mike, how did you watch it last year? You watched it live, right?
I watched it live, and I was reading the theories about what was going to happen at the end of season 1 by the time episode 2 was over, right? I was on Reddit looking at those things, and I was like, that makes complete sense. And the rest of the season, I was like, this is probably what's coming, but that's okay.
I would say, I was kind of in that same boat as you. I didn't go to Reddit, but I listened to a podcast, and they gave the theory out. And I found enjoyment in watching the pieces come together.
Yeah, because at least some people are still getting that experience, whereas like if they give it up all the secrets to everything they've been writing, that's not fun.
The fun of it is, like, I've come up with this theory, I don't know whether it's right or wrong, and then somebody else has come up with a different theory, and they don't know if that's right or wrong.
Right, you're still debating both theories equally until the end of the season, or until something happens throughout the season that blocks off one of the theories.
And even with the books of Game of Thrones, which he mentions in his post, part of the fun is theory crafting around the books. Like, so is something that happens in the books going to happen in the TV show,
how do
they go around that? Yeah. So, I think you're right. This is not a good idea. I would rather it be a theory than someone say this is concrete.
Yeah, I'd rather be 99% sure that the theory I'm reading is true versus knowing it's true and being like, well, I'll just wait till the whole season's over and just binge it then.
Yeah.
What do you think, Justin?
Well, I think in a perfect world, I can understand why this idea would be good. Like, do we all like at least understand that? Like, in a perfect world where like,
I don't. To be honest, I don't see any upside to this idea at all.
Well, the upside is that if theory crafting and reading theories that turn out to be true spoil the fun for some people, then putting those things out there for the people who want to know what happens, they can watch it, and then therefore they're not going to theory craft and potentially spoil it. I understand the point that like you have to go to a Westworld subreddit and seek out Westworld information to get those spoilers. But like in a perfect world where no one's going to take these concrete spoilers and spread them around, then I can understand where they're coming from. I don't think it's a good idea. I agree with that. I think that's the potential upside of it, right?
Maybe, but I don't even see that as an upside. I just see that as something that some people prefer.
Yeah, let's just think about this though for a second. This comes out, Justin reads it, but Mike and I still theory craft, right? So won't Mike and I come up with, like, isn't there a possibility that Mike and I come up with the theory and the correct theory?
Yeah, so I don't think it eliminates the problem necessarily.
Yeah, if anything, it just makes it worse because now we can't theorize, because anytime we try to go to some place where we can theorize, some asshole who's read the spoilers is like, well, you're totally off base. And then it's not fun to theorize whenever you know the answers are already out there.
What if, Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan are kind of sneaky. They're kind of like the J.J. Abrams, mystery box type stuff, right? What if they're just trolling everybody? So they release a video that we think gives away everything, but it really doesn't. And it's just
it's a fake.
Yeah.
It's a fake plot outline with fake
it's a
twists
red
and
herring.
turns. I had that thought too.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But we'd have to wait months to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how long
Can they
could
hold that?
even go on?
Right.
Yeah, like do we know it's fake after the first episode, thus negating the whole thing? I guess.
Yeah.
Or does it go along for like 9 episodes and then the 10th episode is totally different and
They're like,
pulls the rug out?
surprise.
Yeah.
But needless to say, no matter what you think about this, I am so excited about Westworld Season 2. How do you guys feel about it? You guys...
I'm excited for it, but I will, and I'm not even joking when I say I will be 1,000% less excited if they release all the spoilers before the season.
Yep. I'm somewhere in between you two, I suppose. Like I won't pay attention enough if they do release spoilers unless like it pops up on a feed that is something entirely not related to Westworld that I happen to be on, which has happened like for other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been
I like to listen to
on
podcasts.
That's for you, but for me, I won't look up a Westworld podcast, I don't think. But like I've been on certain websites watching certain soccer matches less than legally, and like in the chat on like a soccer match, I've seen spoilers for like big movies, like spoilers for Force Awakens was posted in there. So like there are people that are just like ready to like unexpectedly blindside people with spoilers. So outside of that happening, I don't care too much if they release this video because I won't pay attention to it. But I can, for you, Mike, I do care.
Well, also though, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to avoid it once it's out there.
Right. Well, we will see. So yeah, that is literally it for me for what's on my mind this week. Does anybody have anything else?
No.
Okay, well then let's move into Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs.
Wait a second. Before we attack each other and tear ourselves to shreds like a pack of maniacs, let's just open the sack first and see what's actually in it. It might not even be worth the trouble.
What do you think? I'm not sure. Maybe. Hi.
A rancid apple core, 2 worm-eaten banana peels, a moldy rice cake, a dried-up pickle, tin of sardine bones, a pile of broken eggshells, an old smushed-up rotten gizzard with maggots all over it.
Okay, it's worth it.
All right, guys, before we dive in, I just want to let you guys know that we are going to have a non-spoiler section, and then we're going to dive into spoilers. But we will make sure to let you know before we dive into the spoilers, and also it'll be in the show notes, I believe. So buckle up. It's going to get fun.
All right.
Oh, you're setting a high bar for us.
So go on, Chris. Do something
Hopefully
fun.
the shows are always fun. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Bop, 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 ba-dop, bop. So before we get in, what were your expectations, Justin? How do you feel about Wes Anderson?
Generally, I like Wes Anderson. I like most of his movies. I think some of his style, I guess you would call it, has worn thin on me a little bit. Like I don't get as charmed by it automatically as I have previously. I did really love Grand Budapest Hotel, though. I thought it was really great and the best movie he's made in a while. You know, I really enjoyed Fantastic Mr. Fox, and this looked like it was going to be in a similar vein, obviously because of the stop motion, but you know, I liked the charm that Fantastic Mr. Fox had and just found it really enjoyable to watch and just a really good time. And, you know, I expected the same thing because I think Wes Anderson doesn't necessarily change his style. So, you know, I expected a Wes Anderson stop motion movie.
Yeah, you kind of know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
How about you, Mike? What do you think about Wes Anderson, and what were your expectations?
I'm right there with Justin. I'm a big fan of Wes Anderson. I'm probably, by the sounds of it, I'm probably a larger fan of Wes Anderson. I tend to enjoy his style quite a bit, even though it is pretty repetitive and samey. I don't necessarily mind because it's almost like a whole genre in of itself of just quieter, more low-key movies. I almost just wish that it wasn't a Wes Anderson style and that more movies were just like that. But yeah, I've probably been a fan of every Wes Anderson movie ever. I remember watching Bottle Rocket quite a bit on Comedy Central. I remember my friend in high school showed me Royal Tenenbaums after we watched Bottle Rocket, and it was really great. And yeah, and ever since then, I've seen every Wes Anderson movie in theaters, and I've just been a huge fan. So I was very excited for Isle of Dogs, probably more so than his last couple live-action movies, because I thought Fantastic Mr. Fox is probably better than a lot of his live-action, in my opinion. But that being said, I still love his live-action, so that's not really like a knock to that. I just think that the way Wes Anderson uses stop animation is amazing. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I like Wes Anderson quite a bit too. I saw Royal Tenenbaums in the theater. He's got a quirky nature that just seems fun. Grand Budapest Hotel, I remember just sitting there and thinking, even if you don't like this movie, I'm just glad it exists. It's just so much fun, and it's having so much fun. There's something uplifting about that movie, and not even the story. It's just the way it's being told, and there's so much joy in the way it's being told that I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's just kind of delightful, in my opinion.
Exactly.
It's so pleasant.
I do think, it would be interesting to see Wes Anderson do something different, but I don't think we're ever going to get that. He has a voice, and that's how he knows how to tell stories. And I don't necessarily need him to do something different to enjoy his movies. It would be interesting to see him do something different.
Right. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. But as long as he's doing this, I can enjoy it. And as long as he's having as much fun as I think he's having, I will enjoy his movies, I believe. So at this point, when you go watch a movie, a Wes Anderson movie, if you know or have seen any of his movies before, you know what you're getting into, and you know whether you're going to like it or not. I feel like it's a pretty easy guess if you're going to like Wes Anderson, like if you're going to like Isle of Dogs or not. Does that make sense?
I think it is, but I would also say that I agree with you, but I would also argue that I think his style is getting we may not notice it because we're in it and we've seen every Wes Anderson movie, but I think his style is getting a little bit more accessible.
That could be.
I think I would actually say that his newer stuff is actually more accessible than his older stuff, if that makes sense. Like, for example, I would say that something like Moonrise Kingdom or Isle of Dogs or Grand Budapest would be more accessible to someone who's never seen Wes Anderson than Rushmore or Life Aquatic. Does that make sense? Or do you guys not see the difference at all?
I think Rushmore and Bottle Rocket are his two more accessible films, especially Bottle Rocket, because it's not at style. There's like clues to what he's going to start doing, if that makes sense. I went and saw this movie with several people, and my friend's wife was like, that was weird. And she just, she wasn't into it. So I don't know that she's the representative for everybody, but I do know that he's somewhat inaccessible, and I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I think that a lot of the humor more recently has been built around kind of being in on the joke of Wes Anderson's style and knowing what he does.
I think Wes Anderson is in on his own joke. Like, if you look at his TV commercials and stuff like that, and if you look at his stop animation movies in Grand Budapest, I think he's aware of his own style. And he plays
definitely.
With it.
Yeah, definitely. But I that's why I feel like I think maybe I think his most accessible movie is Rushmore, to be honest, because Bottle Rocket is pretty indie, and there's not a lot of production value necessarily. Like it is a cheaper made movie, right? And
I say Moonrise. I don't know, but I mean, proceed.
Yeah, but yeah. So something like Isle of Dogs, I was noticing that a lot of the laughter was happening based around parts that were stereotypical Wes Anderson moments, right? Like, it wasn't necessarily that the jokes were landing, it didn't feel, but when something was Wes Anderson-y, even if it wasn't a joke, it's like people were laughing. They were like, there it is. That's that old Wes Anderson doing his thing. And like laughing at that as much as they were laughing at any jokes in Isle of Dogs.
Do you think that's a bad thing?
No, I'm just talking about the accessibility, right?
Right.
Like, it's almost like to appreciate some of the humor and points of the movie, you have to be familiar with Wes Anderson's dialogue and his tropes.
Before we get any further in, do we want to give a brief synopsis about the movie?
Or the IMDb synopsis for Isle of Dogs is: set in Japan, Isle of Dogs follows a boy's odyssey in search of his lost dog.
That is, I feel like that's not quite the most accurate statement
No, it's pretty
either,
vague,
but
but
yeah,
that's the
I think
that's
the movie.
synopsis.
Yeah, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that I feel like the movie is a lot more about the dogs and their journey than it is the boys.
Oh, absolutely. And I think they're the most interesting characters in the movie.
So, what did you guys think about the movie? And Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think I enjoyed this movie probably just about as much as The Fantastic Mr. Fox. I would say it's on the higher end of Wes Anderson's movies. I really enjoyed it. It's not without its flaws, but man, I really just enjoy being transported to this stop animation world where everything's just a little fantastic and made with so much care and meticulousness that I just really thoroughly enjoy being in this world. I think Bryan Cranston is a great addition to the Wes Anderson lineup, along with a lot of his regulars like Bill Murray, Jeff Goldblum, Edward Norton. I kind of wish, I like Wes Anderson and Bill Murray, but I kind of wish Bill Murray would do something else. Am I the only one who thinks that?
How do you mean?
I don't know. Does he not seem a little bored to you?
I think he's always seemed a little bored to me. But
Maybe.
that's part of his charm.
Yeah, maybe that's so. Maybe that's the appeal of Bill Murray, is that he never seems particularly happy to be anywhere or doing anything.
I would love to see Bill Murray do more things, but I don't think Bill Murray wants to do more things.
No, and that's probably... And he doesn't need to, because Wes Anderson, he casts the people that he knows what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We knew the performance that Edward Norton and Bill Murray and Jeff Goldblum were going to give in this movie. But does that mean that Jeff Goldblum doesn't make me laugh when he talks about being a gossip? No. I still laugh quite a bit. So if you like Wes Anderson, you're going to love it. If you don't like Wes Anderson and you're tired of his style, guess what? You're going to be tired of this movie probably real quick.
Yeah, I'm not quite as thrilled about this movie as you are, but I really enjoyed it. I think you're right about the stop animation. Even if you were to watch this movie with no sound, or just pause it, the stop animation in itself is so well done and so artful. The only other company that I know of that's doing is the Wallace and Gromit company.
I would argue that Wes Anderson's stop animation movies are significantly less ugly than the Wallace and Gromit movies. Those movies are hideous to look at.
Yeah, they get churned out a little bit faster, and they're a little bit more claymation style.
They're hideous.
Yeah, and I wouldn't... Hideous may be a bit much for me, but I would say that they're definitely a different... They're both stop motion, but ultimately they're using different materials.
And to me, Wes Anderson's movies have so much more care, like the fur and the smoke. Every time he uses smoke, he uses cotton balls, and it's just so creative.
Yeah, there is a lot of creativity, and and I think that's sometimes part of the joke, because the smoke is cotton balls, and it's fun to watch that, right?
What about you, Justin?
So I'll start by saying that I think this movie is one of my least favorite Wes Andersons based on first viewing. I did not enjoy it that much outside of the visuals, like the sets and the camera work and the movement and the framing. To what Chris said, I agree 100% that this movie looks amazing, and watching it without sound would be just as satisfying to me in all the same ways. Like you said, Mike, the detail and the love that's going into the visual style and everything that's going on in the frame is constantly interesting, from the cotton ball smoke to when people are on TV, they're actually just drawings. Animated drawings, 2D animation. Yeah, they're not actual stop motion figures, and there's all kinds of quirky stuff to look at, and I think you could watch this movie with no sound and have no end of fascinating things to look at and be entertained. And that was the most entertaining thing throughout the movie for me. I also I enjoyed the music. The score and was very reminiscent of Akira Kurosawa and older
Seven Samurai was in there.
Yeah,
the theme for Seven Samurai was in there.
Oh, okay, well.
So
then there it is.
Yeah.
It's from there. But I think they also made other music that has that sort of samurai vibe to it, which was all really enjoyable. For me, the things that I thought were lacking compared to normal Wes Anderson movies, that I did not think the characters were nearly as rich. And granted, there are a lot of dogs, but I found the characters not as interesting or enjoyable or funny as Fantastic Mr. Fox, to use a direct stop motion comparison, but also generally in his movies, his characters and their quirks and their witticisms, I guess, and way of speaking is like a lot of like the entertainment and what's going on. And I just didn't get that from as many characters. A lot of the characters didn't do that for me. So I didn't find like much entertainment in it. And I think the story is a little bit weak underneath that because it's pretty simple and pretty basic, I think, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like if it's a simple skeleton to build all of this stuff on, and I can appreciate that, but it just felt like the characters didn't quite hit the level that they normally do in a Wes Anderson film for me, like as far as being funny and like the charisma that they have, you know. And we kind of get the typical Wes Anderson humor that we normally get, which I was growing tired of prior to like Grand Budapest Hotel, but I thought Grand Budapest Hotel actually had a bit of like reinvention of what he was doing, at least to the sense where I found it a little fresher, and like he had kind of turned a new page and found a way to do the same thing but make it not feel the same. And this one I felt it was a little bit more samey, more back to what he'd done before. And yeah, so I don't know. I usually like Wes Anderson movies less the first time I see him and a lot more on the second viewing. So I do want to qualify my opinion with that statement.
That is a really interesting thing. I find myself oftentimes the same way. I'll watch the movie the first time. I'll like it enough. The second time, I find that it really grows on me. Maybe it's just that quirk or whatever that's going on in there.
Yeah, like Life Aquatic is, you know, one of my favorite Wes Anderson movies. And Mike, you actually, when we were very, very first hanging out, you convinced me to buy that movie with a Blockbuster gift card that I got for Christmas so we could watch it. And we watched it, and while I somewhat enjoyed it, I didn't quite get it, and I didn't quite get into it until I think I watched it again at some other point, you know.
Right. No, I get that. That's the way I felt about the Royal Tenenbaums. Because Bottle Rocket doesn't feel very Wes Anderson-y, but by the time Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums hit, he has discovered himself.
Yeah, and I feel like Royal Tenenbaums is peak Anderson.
That is like, the most Wes Anderson-y thing. And my friend in high school named Joe made me, or didn't make me, but he said that was his favorite movie. And we watched it, and I watched the whole thing and didn't get it at all. It was just completely lost on me. And it wasn't until Life Aquatic was in theaters that I was like, oh, hold on. And then I watched it again and loved it. So I hear what you're saying, but I've also never felt that since I've acclimated to Wes Anderson. Ever since that first viewing of the Royal Tenenbaums, it hasn't taken 2 viewings for me to come around to any Wes Anderson movie. Maybe Grand Budapest. I didn't like it as much the first time when I saw it in theaters as I did later on, after I watched it a couple months later. But I think that was because it's his least funny movie. It's the most dramatic movie, I think.
Conversely, with Grand Budapest, I have only seen it once and I loved it.
Yeah, so
so it does vary, but I know that I enjoyed Fantastic Mr. Fox more the second time. I actually still haven't watched Moonrise Kingdom a second time, but that's mostly because I didn't like that one that much either. But with all the other ones, I can say for sure the first time I just didn't get, even Bottle Rocket the first time, I didn't quite get the humor and characters.
Yeah. I think Moonrise, I got moved by that one the first time. I got moved by Isle of Dogs. Let's keep it about Isle of Dogs, I guess.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, spoiler free, would be Bryan Cranston. I think his dog character is so good. Well, first,
he's, to agree with you, he's the best part of the movie, and I think he's the character that has the most like charisma and charm and interest.
Oh, absolutely. He is so good, and he fits into this Wes Anderson style so well. I would love to see him in a live-action Wes Anderson movie someday. One of the first things that you know about him is that he's a stray through and through, and he doesn't want to be owned. He doesn't want a master. He doesn't want a human, you know? He's even a biter. You know, he even says, like, I'm a biter. And throughout the course of the movie, to see him change his mind whenever he starts to feel a little bit of love, I found that to be very moving. The simplicity of the story to be very moving. Like, I know it may seem a little simple since it's just about dogs and the characters are pretty simple, but that's okay, because in the stop animation, like, it'd be different if it was a live action movie, but in the stop animation world, it feels like it's enough, because there are bigger ideas in this Wes Anderson movie than I feel like there are in most Wes Anderson movies, to where the characters are more vessels to make that point versus characters themselves to be complex and as two-dimensional as their live-action movies, you know? Or as three-dimensional as the live-action movies, excuse me.
You know, I wonder how much of that is... Because I love the dogs. The dog story was really great. I just wish we had stayed on the island more.
Yeah, I think the people's story is a little weak, but it's not terrible either. But it's also the problematic part of this movie.
Right. I think if we had stayed on the island, and because those are the characters I like the most, and every time we kind of go away or we do the flashbacks and stuff like that, it kind of lost me a little bit. So yeah, I guess I wonder how much of Justin's. I wonder how much he would have liked the movie if it had been more just about the dogs as opposed to going to the Japanese story and that stuff.
Maybe so. I mean, we might have had more time with the dogs, because I even feel that the other dogs outside of Bryan Cranston's dogs, which, by the way, I did not even know that was Bryan Cranston until Nicole told me after we left the movie theater, which I think is to what Mike was saying, that he fits in so well that it doesn't feel out of place. Like I wasn't even thinking about whose voice this is. And that was actually that way with a lot of the people, except for maybe the ones that had really, really distinct voices like Bill Murray or Jeff Goldblum. But the other dogs and other things going on around it just lacked that charm and lacked that like charisma that normally keeps me entertained with Wes Anderson movies, of having so many interesting characters doing interesting, charming, funny, weird, offbeat things.
So even in the dog world, that way. So even in the dog world, you felt that way.
I did, or I felt like I just didn't get enough of what I wanted more from it. So maybe to your point, like if we had spent more time there and less time with the humans, which I think the humans, almost all of them, were very much like the weakest part of the movie. And there were times when I got bored, and most of that was when we were with the humans. And we would have had, if we hadn't had those human parts, we would have spent more time with the dogs, and maybe they would have been developed more. So I guess before we move into spoilers, do you guys want to say whether or not you'd recommend going to see this movie? Should you see it in theaters? Should you wait until it comes out? Maybe hits Netflix, maybe not. What do you think, Chris?
I think Wes Anderson deserves to be seen on the big screen, but like I said earlier, it's Wes Anderson. You know what you're getting into, so you know whether you're going to like it or not. So if you do like Wes Anderson, go see it on the big screen, especially for the stop animation like we talked about. It's really beautiful to watch. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm right there with Chris. I think if you're a fan of Wes Anderson, you're going to like the movie. If you maybe feel some fatigue, it probably won't go away or be lessened by this movie.
Yeah, this won't be refreshing to that fatigue.
Right.
Sure.
But that being said, if that doesn't bother you, or if that's maybe even a comfort to you, or what you even seek out, then by all means you're gonna love this movie. Also, I think that I agree with these guys. It would have been better had it been all about the dogs and less about the humans, and I think you would have eliminated a lot of the backlash that's been going around for this movie.
Real quick, I think we can talk about the fact that most of the humans speak Japanese in the movie, and it's unsubtitled, so a lot of the times we don't know what they're saying. I don't think that's a spoiler. That's like what's told to you from like the first like 30 seconds of the movie, that's what it's going to be like. Right. So do you think that any of like the lack of human interest came from that, or do you feel like people who aren't like avid movie watchers that might have the patience for that kind of thing, do you think that like the average movie goer will have the patience for that, or do you think that would bug them?
I think they'll have the patience for it, and if you don't, you're watching movies wrong.
Chris, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I don't think there's any wrong way to watch movies. You just either enjoy it or don't.
There definitely is a wrong way to watch movies.
Yeah. You could face the wrong way. You could turn around completely.
You could go in with a bad attitude.
That's true. Okay, so I would agree about going to see this movie in the theaters, and agree that if you like Wes Anderson, you'll at the very least like this movie, if not love it. If you dislike Wes Anderson, you won't like it. If you're a little tired of Wes Anderson, there will be times where the movie's a little trying, like it was for me. But I will say that go to the movie theaters to see it, because technically speaking and visually and as far as sound, everything to me is firing on like 11 out of 10 range, and that level of detail that's in the movie deserves to be seen on the big screen, and the love that was put into it shines even better on the big screen than it will on your TV or your phone or whatever you want to watch it on that's not a theater.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Real quick, Oscar prediction, does this win Best Animated Film?
No, but I bet it gets a nomination, but does it win because of all the hot takes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so let's move into spoilers.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so going into spoilers, I enjoyed the Tilda Swinton dog. The Oracle that knows how to read TV. I thought that she was really good. And then what was the partner's name? The Saint Bernard. I
Jupiter.
thought he was good. Jupiter. Yeah. So I thought that there's some of that Wes Anderson charm that you kind of found lacking.
Yeah,
from
that was
some of
pretty
the other
great.
stuff.
Yeah, I thought that was fun.
Yeah, I like that whole section basically where Harvey Keitel shows up and he talks about how the one time they had to be cannibals.
Oh yeah.
It's just so sad. It made me laugh.
I have to say, Edward Norton in Wes Anderson films is my favorite Edward Norton.
I would probably agree.
Yeah, I think he fits into this better than he fits into a lot of things because he has such a dry voice.
Yeah, and he just, like in Moonrise Kingdom, he just seems to be having so much fun that I just really enjoy watching all the actors, really, but especially Edward Norton.
I think this is the Wes Anderson movie that has more to say than any of the other Wes Anderson movies that have existed so far. Did you guys get any of that when watching this? Like, in comparing it to today's political climate?
Yeah, I felt that way. I felt like
it's a blatant allegory for immigration.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it was all very allegorical, as you said, metaphorical. And that, to me, that's pretty blatant, pretty apparent. And
when do you think they started making this movie?
I'm not sure. He said he had the idea of like at least the title of the movie for a while.
Yeah, because I wonder how much it just fits into today's society type of thing as opposed to he set out to say that. Does that make sense?
I don't know. I like it better thinking that he did set out to say something. Versus,
and it's not.
Versus,
it's a hot issue right now, but it's not a new issue.
That's
you
true.
know, I think it's just probably become, more prominent since he started making the film. I'm sure than it was whenever he had the idea. Like, I doubt the idea was based around, current political events that are happening within the last year or two, even.
I doubt this was a brainchild of wanting to make a statement of any kind, so much as just realizing that he could make a statement with the movie. And I think it's a better movie for it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's one of the better parts of the movie, or better takeaways, and something that does in some ways go beyond what Wes Anderson normally does.
And here's what I took from it, right? It's about showing that we have the ability to change our minds. We don't have to be the way we are just because we say that's what's what. The mayor hates dogs the whole time and loves cats, but at the end, his mind is changed. It's a simple child's movie plot device, right? Because no one ever changes their minds in real life. And look at Bryan Cranston's dog. He is a stray. He's proud of being a stray. He doesn't want to be owned. He thinks he knows himself, and he thinks he knows what he likes. And he thinks he knows what's what. But as time goes on, he learns to love, and he learns that accepting love is sometimes better than, the person you thought you were who couldn't accept love. When it comes time to change, that's all you have to do. You just have to do it.
Yeah, and there's a sense that for all of those characters, Bryan Cranston's character and the mayor, that the reason they feel the way they do about either themselves or for the mayor about dogs is because that's the way it's always been, right?
Right.
Like the story that is told at the very beginning of the movie of the boy samurai cutting off the head or whatever, and the mayor's bloodline was part of the bloodline that was like screwed over by the dogs in that situation. So it was like, well, they've always since then hated dogs and liked cats. And so he is obviously very far removed, probably by centuries, from like when the story is supposed to be taking place. And he knows, okay, my family doesn't like dogs. I've been told this, right?
Right.
And for the dog, as long as he knows he's been a stray. So it's basically these characters accepting the world around them that they see and not questioning anything beyond that,
And through the course of the movie, they learn to care, and they learn to realize that you don't have to just continue about the way you are now. You can change. You can observe and learn to love and learn to be better. And I don't know, I found that to be very heartwarming in this movie, and I didn't expect that going into it.
My favorite moment is probably the story that Bryan Cranston tells about biting the human hand when he was adopted. And he says, I don't know why I bit him. I just did. And he feels kind of bad about it too. He wasn't exactly sure why he did it, but he's for sure, I'm this kind of dog, and I'm never going to be
right.
The other
He's
kind
so
of dog.
sure of himself at the beginning of the movie. And he's so confident that he has himself figured out. But do we ever really have ourselves figured out? You're always changing.
Yeah, and I think it's worth considering too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember in the end of the movie, he still is struggling with biting, right? Even though he's changed and he's agreed to be the boy's bodyguard, etc., he's still like, I think I remember saying that like it's kind of a struggle to still not bite. Like he still has that drive.
He has to take it one day at a time.
Yeah,
Right.
That's right. That's what it is. And so even when you do change, you're not just magically cured, which is something that I like about that whole ending resolution of everybody. Like no one changed, like no one flipped a switch and all of a sudden, you know, Bryan Cranston's dog, what is his name? Because I don't want to say Bryan Cranston's dog anymore.
Spots. No, that wasn't the dog. Chief. Yeah. So, you know, Chief didn't just flip a switch and all of a sudden he's a good dog that has an owner that is refined and, you know, no longer any remnants of a stray to be found in him, you know?
Right, exactly.
Well, he found love and he wants to earn it, right? So he's got to change in order to be worthy of that love.
Like I said, this is one of my favorite things about the movie is that you have this message to take, and that's something I walked away feeling, you know, despite the movie being less enjoyable in some ways than other Wes Anderson movies, right? Like to me, it was a lot less comedic. Like I didn't laugh very much. Like there's a few funny parts. Like I definitely laughed at the Oracle dog at the TV. Like all of those bits were really great, but it's not as funny. I thought it was a bit more dramatic.
Yeah, maybe. I also felt that way about Grand Budapest. I think that movie is essentially a drama with some funny parts, but I don't mind that. I kind of like dramedy Wes Anderson.
I mean, I feel like that's a lot of his movies, but there just seems to be
There's a quirkiness
more
to the
fun
characters.
to be had in other ones.
Yeah, there's a quirkiness to the characters so the drama's real for the characters, but the way the characters deal with the drama is quirky and unusual, and a lot of times the humor comes from that.
Right. And I mean, that goes to what I was saying earlier about like it seemed like the audience was laughing more at the Wes Anderson-ness of the whole thing or of the situation or of the character's reaction more than there being like actual funny parts. So I don't know if that's necessarily the right way every time to view these moments, because I did feel it was more dramatic and there was a lot less that was intended to be funny that people were laughing at. And I think just for me, I've seen all of those things so many times before, and there weren't as many inventive things. Like as much as we're talking about the cotton ball cloud smoke, you know, I've seen Fantastic Mr. Fox a few times, so like that didn't feel very new to me, or funny.
Not necessarily new or funny, but it's also, I think, better animated. I think this is made better than the Fantastic Mr. Fox. So like even if it's not laugh out loud funny, I think it's like appreciating the craftsmanship of the cartoon is just as valuable as, you know, belly laughs the first time, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree that it's better made. Like I said, technically speaking and visually speaking, I think this is firing on like 11 out of 10 on a 10 out of 10 scale, right? And I would say Fantastic Mr. Fox is more like sometimes a 9, sometimes a 10. Like
Sure.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is incredibly animated as well. This is just taking it up a level.
Sure, but I don't know. I think, from my perspective, I think you're underselling the story and the script a little bit. I think there is more here. It's not as good. I don't think there's more going on than Grand Budapest, but I would say this has got more going on than something like Moonrise or Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think it's far from the best Wes Anderson, but I still think it's in the higher end.
Yeah, I think I like it better than Moonrise and Darjeeling, which are lower for me. I think, and I don't know, maybe it's just the theater that I was in was laughing a lot more at the Wes Anderson-ness of it, and it made me feel like the things that were going on weren't funny and we're just getting laughter, and it made the movie feel less successful to me because of that. Does that make sense? It might have been down to experience a little bit.
Let me ask you, how do you know they're laughing at the Wes Anderson-ness of it? I mean, and I don't, like,
I don't have an example in my head specifically of when it happened. I just remember thinking that, like, oh, no joke happened there, but it got laughters on, like, you know, like a camera zoom or...
But a camera zoom could be
some of the
joke,
animation. It can be, but I remember thinking that it wasn't, you know?
I don't know the specific part you're talking about, but I do know that I can think of at least 2 Wes Anderson zooms that make me laugh in other movies that are meant to be jokes.
Yeah, a zoom can be funny. Don't get me wrong about that. Like, zooms, can be great. That's probably just a bad example on my part.
Sure.
I mean, I guess it's a good question. How do I know what they're laughing at? I don't know what they were laughing at. I guess I just
You're making an assumption,
thinking,
sort of.
yeah, and I think that it just didn't feel like a joke to me or a moment that warranted laughter, but it was getting laughs for one reason or another, and I just felt like I assumed that.
What did you guys think of the decision to, from a filmmaking perspective, to not include subtitles and just have a translation from the human perspective, and also just the human story in general? What did you guys think of that side of the movie? We've covered a lot of the dog stuff.
So I think this is where a lot of the cultural appropriation problems come in that everyone keeps talking about. Although if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes and the audience scores and the IMDb scores, it doesn't seem like anyone's that upset about this. But it's part of the conversation, right? Like, you can't read about Isle of Dogs without hearing about this. And I guess the complaint is that the dogs are in English and the Japanese characters are not given subtitles. They're given a very simplistic form of Japanese, and they're not translated at all. And then on top of that, you have an American student played by Greta Gerwig, who's the white savior trope.
Right.
So that's kind of where this movie's come under fire. But what I would argue is that, sure, none of that is wrong. If you get offended at this movie and its use of the Japanese culture, you're not wrong. No one's there to tell you you're wrong. But what I will say is that it doesn't feel malicious, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like Wes Anderson's doing it from a place of ugliness. It also seems like the language barrier aspect is necessary for this movie to work, because it is such a direct allegory to immigration and what's going on now, that you need a language barrier difference between the dogs and the human characters. I don't know that it needs to be Japanese per se, but there does need to be a language barrier.
Right. I would say the issue comes from in my perspective, and I think you're right about he's very earnest in it. Definitely does not seem like he's malicious in any way. But a lot of it comes from there aren't other people that make movies besides white guys. Does that make sense? So if we had more viewpoints, like most movies come from a certain viewpoint, hopefully sometime in the future we can have a more diverse filmmaking problem. Like it's an industry problem as opposed to a Wes Anderson problem. Does that make sense?
So I don't know, because I haven't read anything about this movie or any of the controversy surrounding it. So I guess can we explain like specifically what the cultural appropriation issue is in general, and in specific like how it like is represented in this movie supposedly?
Sure. So from what I gather is that there were some Asian Americans writers who specifically were upset, and then a whole bunch of other writers retweeted them and shared the stories, and it kind of took off from there. But what they're saying seems like it's touring Japanese culture from like a tourist standpoint. You know what I mean? Like it's exotic and neat, which is why it's in there, but for no other reason. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason for them to be Japanese and not something else, But Wes Anderson stuck it in Japan for no other reason than he just wanted to.
I would also argue that the Greta Gerwig character
the white savior
bit of an
trope.
issue.
I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, there's a white savior trope in there, which is pretty true. I was consciously aware of that when I was watching it, which is just that like the Japanese characters themselves don't have any kind of like agency. The white savior comes in there to tell the mayor off and tell all the Japanese citizens to fuck your mayor. He's an evil jerk.
But doesn't the boy change his mind?
The boy does, but he's not the one in the country trying to quote unquote change things and saving everything. He's with the dogs.
I think the naming of some of the Japanese characters is somewhat problematic. It's very superficial. Like the boy's name is Atari. The Japanese girl scientist's name is Yoko Ono.
But it's played by Yoko Ono.
Yeah, that's just an in joke. And like Kobayashi is a common.
It's a very surface level
pop culture sort of reference.
Right.
I think
it's a very surface level understanding of the Japanese culture, and I don't have a problem with that. I think the most problematic thing is the Greta Gerwig character, but other than that, and even then, I think it's coming from a place of earnestness, and I think it's good to talk about these things, even if we don't necessarily agree with it.
Right. Well, and also I think that the cultural appropriation discussion is also missing the point of the movie, which is what I've kind of been trying to talk about this whole time, right? Which is like without this language barrier and this cultural barrier in the story. It doesn't have to be Japanese versus dogs. It could be, something else versus dogs. Something that Wes Anderson has more of a right in some people's eyes to write about. But I don't know. I feel like it's too simplistic to just write it off altogether and be like, well, there's no reason for it to take place in Japan. There's a reason. You just may not agree that the reason is worth it, I think.
Yeah, there's actually this article I read from Slate.com, and I just wanted to read, maybe we'll link to this in the show notes. It's written by Emily Yoshida. And so what she decided to do is have Japanese people watch the movie, people that spoke Japanese, and then get their takes on it. And so I wanted to read this. She had 3 people do it. What one of them says is, all in all, despite a few things that are tone deaf, which I think is true, I think it's quite respectful depiction of Japanese culture, Beam says. Even when some of the language quirks stumbled, the essence of the film felt particularly Japanese. I love that Atari, a Japanese character, is portrayed as an ultimate hero who values friendship more than anything, which is the same concept as what most Japanese animes and dramas, old or current, revolve around. Lisa also really enjoyed the film and thinks it will go over well with Japanese viewers when it's released there in May. It's not an accurate reflection of Japan, but it's based on Japanese fables and a Japanese point of view and Japanese problems, and we love dogs. So I think you're perfectly well within your right to have an issue. I think you need to watch the movie before you have an issue, but I think that there's both sides to this. I don't think it's as offensive as some movies can be, and it comes from an honest and earnest place.
Yeah, I don't think it's offensive at all. I think like if you're harping on that point or like focusing on that point too much, like Mike said, I think you're missing the point of the movie, and especially in the sense that like you're just putting up a line in the sand almost and encouraging sides to be taken and division to be made, right?
The Greta Gerwig character is an issue, but other than that,
I disagree. I don't even think that's an issue.
She's a white savior. Like you could have
So what?
I mean, you could have a Japanese character come in and speak English.
I mean, you do have a Japanese character come in and change the mind and save the day. That's why I say so what.
I would argue that, I mean, you have a white character going in telling these Japanese people that they're wrong about stuff and that they're, it's just, I don't know that it jives very well.
I agree with you on principle, Justin, but I do agree with Chris in this particular instance that I think the white savior part of it does seem a little quaint, and I don't say that as a reaction to what everyone else said, but like I remember when I was watching the movie, I remember as soon as she popped up, I was like, oh, the white savior. Like that trope is something that just popped into my brain, and that's not good. I don't like that trope. You know what I mean? Like that trope makes me roll my eyes a lot of the times. If this had come out like 10 years ago, I might not even have noticed it, but there's been a lot of white savior tropes lately.
Legend of Bagger Vance.
The Help.
There's a lot of them. Yeah.
Hidden
Sandra
Figures.
Bullock.
Blind Side.
Yeah, the Blind Side. Yeah, there's it's just like it's an annoying trope,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would understand that point if she did everything, but like I said, the Atari character comes in and has just as much to do with like convincing the people or the mayor or whoever to reverse the dog.
Oh yeah, it's not the worst case of a white savior trope that I've ever seen, but it did come up in my brain whenever I was watching.
On the human side of it, she's the only one that sees what's happening. She figures it all out, and except
for all the Japanese scientists who are doing the research.
But the argument, and I don't think it's wrong, is that if you're going to take place in Japan and you're going to make it about the other culture, it could just as easily be a Japanese girl telling all the Japanese politicians and citizens that their mayor is terrible and she hates them and that they need to change their ways.
That's how I would feel. Yeah.
Like it's not a big deal, but it's not wrong for people who feel that way, I don't think.
All right, what's next?
So we've kind of talked about how this is probably Anderson's most obviously political and current movie about current ideas and whatnot. Do you think that this is going to be a style that he will proceed with in the future, or do you think that he's going to go back to more character-based comedies, or would you even want Wes Anderson to try to tackle current subject matter going forward?
I'm always down for having the current situation and the social and political situation in the world being commented on. I think if he goes more comedic or something, he'll have to do it more subtly, I think, in a live action film.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Than he does here. I think here it's very blatant, maybe it just feels more blatant because the way that the world has gone since probably this movie started to be made.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does feel very blatant and on the nose. And so if he does continue to do it, I would like it to stay either more subtle or on the optimistic side of things like this is. Like you said, it has a very optimistic message, and I don't want to be preached at in a Wes Anderson film about something that's like ultimately like a really negative viewpoint on the world, right? Like that just sounds like a bummer all around and like antithetical to like the vibe of his movies and what there is to enjoy about his movies.
Yeah, I would say his movies frequently to me have a bittersweet feel to them, but I think I appreciated this one a lot more because it felt more optimistic than maybe his usual like character driven movies. Usually those characters don't end the movie in a particularly happy place.
Right. I would say the bittersweet thing. I don't really mind how Wes Anderson tells the stories or how, whether it's a political message or not. I think the Wes Anderson style fits a lot of things, or it can. So I'm good with whatever he wants to do next.
So this is kind of changing the subject, but did anybody die in this movie?
Yes, the Japanese scientist was poisoned.
Oh, he did.
By wasabi, which also might be a little problematic, but maybe not.
Poison wasabi?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
It seems a little on the nose.
Well, it made sense when it was him because they were poisoning him by like tricking him into eating it, and it needed to resemble food.
Real quick, hold that thought. Did you guys also love the over-the-head shot of like the sushi being made? Like in stop animation. For some reason I just love that. I loved like putting everything together and like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like every time I saw someone like either making food or I don't know, like banging drums, like interacting with stuff.
Yeah.
Was always like the coolest to me. But anyway, I'm sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking that during the movie I thought that a couple characters had died or were going to die, which is usually kind of a big part of the bittersweetness of Wes Anderson films, is that usually a character will die or something will die. And maybe I'm wrong in thinking that, but that happens a lot. Like Darjeeling Limited, there's a kid who dies in it. Life Aquatic, somebody dies. A couple people die in that, actually. But anyways, so I was just thought it was interesting that nobody died, or at least I guess like that character was kind of minor, but none of the major characters died, which is different. And it is like I guess no one died in Fantastic Mr. Fox either. So maybe it's just like they're more family friendly and he's not going to kill off characters. But I did have moments where I got like kind of that bittersweet, sad feeling when I thought characters were going to die. Like when the dogs go into the incinerator, I literally thought, I was like, that's the last time we're going to see them. They're actually going to die. That
was the best joke, I think, of the whole thing. When they come, they're going through it, and they're like, well, a week ago we would have been dead by now if it was working better.
But also, well, they also keep like making you think other characters died too. Like initially you think Spots died when he comes to look for him.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the movie, they make it look like Spots died too, with like the statue, and then the camera like tracks down to reveal he's actually alive.
I also thought it was funny whenever they would just put like brutally harsh like realities of dog life in normal dialogue, like, yeah, I'm from a litter, but they drowned all the girls. Stuff like that, where it's like really terrible dark stuff that dogs endure.
Right.
Yeah. Which was weird. This is some of the things I didn't laugh at, right?
Yeah,
I just thought,
they're not like funny, but they're like
funny.
But they make me smile because it's just so, I don't know, like silly to hear someone say it so dry.
Right.
Like at one point where Bryan Cranston's like describing what to do, and he's like, "Go here. You're gonna meet a bitch named Nutmeg."
Right.
The dog jokes made me laugh. And also, did you notice that one dog had a flea going in and out of his fur?
Yeah, I noticed that several times, I think.
Yeah, there's a few shots where but I just thought that was a cool like attention to detail.
Like the tick. And the one dog got it off of him.
Oh yeah.
That's a fully unnecessary detail, and like part of the example of like what's going on visually, how there's so much detail, so much love put into it and care that the movie just exceeds on all levels, visual and technical.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, any last thoughts? We good to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Okay, so before we end the episode, we did want to go through and find out what genre we would like Wes Anderson to tackle next, or soon. I guess not necessarily his next film. So, Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think it would be really funny if Wes Anderson did a Marvel film, like a superhero film, with his level of quirkiness. I think that would be like Owen Wilson could play the superhero.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
It's the Marvel film that would interest me more than any other Marvel film, for sure.
How about you, Mike?
I'm not going to lie. That sounds absolutely terrible. I do think that the color scheme of some of the outer space Marvel stuff, he could do some really cool stuff with, because those movies are really colorful. Mm-hmm. And Wes Anderson knows how to use color better than anyone I could think of right now.
For sure.
And I think a lot of those movies could be really pretty in the hands of someone with like some vision, you know? Mm-hmm. I would like to see Wes Anderson tackle horror. Like, I would like to see Wes Anderson go like balls to the wall horror. Still his style. Less of symmetrical shots and slow pacing and dry. But I think him trying to genuinely scare somebody would be interesting. And I don't know that it could be done.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'd get something interesting. And of course, SNL did the horror parody of Wes Anderson. Have you seen that, Mike?
I don't know if I've seen that one, but I've seen several takes on Wes Anderson parodies, you know?
Yeah, their parody is actually like really spot on. It's got Edward Norton in it, and it's actually really good. Like, and if anything, I've had that thought before that I'd like to see him do a horror movie simply because of the SNL parody, because it's so good. You can kind of start to imagine what it might be like. Right. And it seems like a lot of fun. So if you haven't seen it, you should watch it.
Think I will. What about you, Justin?
So I don't think I'm going to go with a genre, but more of a specific type of film. Like I guess it's like what Chris said, like a Marvel movie, as opposed to like saying like an action movie or something like that. I would like to see him do a time travel film because I think he's so inventive and creative with things that I don't think I have the capability of imagining how much fun he would have with that and how fun that would be to watch, and what he would do with like the story and the characters that can come out of like a time travel film. You know, maybe we have like 3 or 4 Ed Nortons running around being amazing in a Wes Anderson film.
The time machine would look amazing. It would just be this weird machine like run on steam or something. It would be awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, though, to see him try to tackle science fiction or anything, like, heavier.
Yeah, anything that's not hyper stylized sort of slice of life type stuff.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
All right. Well, I think that does it. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Next week, we'll be doing a Casually Criterion episode on Samuel Fuller's Shock Corridor, spine number 19.
Yep, and if you want to send us any questions you want us to answer on Shock Corridor, or let us know what you think about Isle of Dogs or anything we've covered in the past, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinemedia. You can join our Facebook group and talk film with us at facebook.com/groups/casualcinemedia, or you can email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
All right, that's it for today, so I guess we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later.